Hey guys, today we're going to learn how to pocket. This tutorial is by Team 6133 The Nuts, and we should get started. So, I'm going to teach you a little bit about pocketing. First, we're going to go over best practices, and then I'll show you how to actually do it. So, to pocket, we're going to use this tool called Vent. Vent is where you make struts in a sketch in Onshape, and then using those struts, use the Vent tool, and they become the actual struts from the lines that you made in the sketch. So let's just go over some best practices. You generally want to make triangles that are equilateral so they distribute the forces the best, and you generally want them to be all about the same size. Now obviously there are going to be some places where that's not exactly possible, such as close constraints to holes and edges, and then sometimes you'll get a weird oblong shape just based on hole structure, and those are things that you have to deal with and determine if that's acceptable for you. And so in the end, pockets that are a little bit oblong can end up being a little weird, and this isn't distributing force great. It's almost like two parallel struts that are very strong in this direction, but are transmitting almost no force in this direction. So you want to avoid that if you can, but one or two areas on your part is not too crazy if they have that. Another thing is you generally want to give a good offset from the edge of your part. So if we go back to the sketch, we can see that this offset is about 6 millimeters from the edge. So you're giving that much of a buffer along with the 7 millimeters from the vent. So now let's talk about these numbers. These numbers are generally very important when we're talking about material and how you're going to make the sketch. So because we're using 6061 aluminum, we can remove about 60% of the material. And so when you have kind of bigger pockets like this, I like to use 7 millimeter thickness and 3 millimeter radius because it gives good clearance around holes with the radius, and the struts are pretty thick to maintain that good amount of material and strength. So now we're going to go and we're going to show how to start from scratch. So you're going to align all your faces together and you're going to create a sketch. So to start the sketch, you're always going to want to make an offset from the edge of your part. See, I'll change. Oh, is there a... Well, that's not a great section of our model. We'll have to work around that and go and do an offset from the other side. What this offset is doing is making sure that we have a very thick outer wall that is a little bit thicker than the struts, just so that the very edges of the plate are very well constrained together. Okay, even though those don't meet, we're going to make this a 6 millimeter outside, and then I'm going to have to go in and manually connect these because our part is not perfect. So that should be good, and that's all constrained together. So now we're going to have to start with the strut lines. I generally like to make circles around any bearing holes that go to all the or motor holes that go to the ones surrounding them. And these are also all bearing holes, so we're going to make an offset for all of them. We're going to make that about 6 as well. And if you have overlapping struts, that is completely fine because the vent tool just brushes over them. So now that that is all done, we are going to start doing struts. And so what you want to prioritize with struts is getting all the holes connected in a way that they're going to be maintained strong. So you want to start with all the ones that are close to the edge. You want to connect them to a strong point in the edge. So whether that means a corner or straight to the closest edge, both are fine. This is a little bit of a weird place, so we're going to have to figure out how to make this a thing. I believe this is an oblong bearing hole to kind of give it some play, so I'm going to give an extra big tolerance surrounding it. Okay, let's go over how I did on this shape and some of the pain points. So, as you can see, I tried to make as many triangles as possible while avoiding shapes like this, because shapes like this create patterns that don't transmit forces very well, and so that can be an issue. And so you want to make triangles as much as you can and make them as evenly sized as you can. I did my best, but there were some areas that were just a little bit hard to do, such as down by this. So I determined that this stuff would be metal that would be completely left intact, so that these could have as much strength as possible because they look like motor mounts. As well as I try to connect these points as much because I believe they are wheel mounts as well. And so that really puts a emphasis on strength around the areas that need strengths, such as these bearing holes. I connected them all in a line. And as you saw in the time lapse, I really focused on making sure all the holes were connected to each other in a very strong way, so that all these extra patterns that I'm making are providing strength to those holes and those attachments. And so another thing that you can really focus on is to make the best triangles. Try and find a point that makes a lot of triangles very even, so that you can create central points that kind of give extra strength because they'll be thick and they'll be centralized nodes for the force to be spread to. So let me show you how to use the vent tool. I will put a link to it down in the description, but it is a feature script in Onshape, and the way it works is you'll click the faces that you need the pockets to be. So now we're going to go back and look at the final piece and see what pockets are weird and why they are weird and what we can do to change that. So I noticed some pockets like these are just really small, not doing much, and they're a little bit oblong, and then this area is a little bit cramped. So let's go back and look at that. And these pockets are pretty weird. So we'll go take a look and see how to fix those. So for this pocket, it's mostly just the fact that it's a super oblong shape and it's not a triangle, so that came out looking weird. This section could be divided into less triangles, so we'll take a look at what that looks like. And even though these are kind of oblong shapes, we're going to have to make do with them because of how small this area gets. And then up here, we can, in reality, get rid of this strut because it was just making this longer triangle slightly shorter and providing a little more strength to this hole. But this hole should be alright because it's going to be leaving a lot of metal there, and this entire point will be connected. So let's go back to vent and let's take a look at what it looks like now. So I think that looks a lot better down here. We have a little bit of a weird pocket here, so we'll take a look at what that means to fix it. And then this area is looking a lot better up here. So in general, that was my tutorial on how to pocket. And with pocketing, you can end up creating a robot that looks really good and functions really well. And so this is what the final piece ended up looking like for this part. I ended up increasing it into a 6mm thickness and a 2mm tool radius, and I fixed the areas down here and the areas up here, and it ends up being a very strong and good looking part. And hopefully their robot will turn out really well for this, because this part is for 6298 Tech Titans,